Hey everyone, so it's another day. It's a little bit colder out. Got my hat to stay warm. I got a fire going in the shop wood stove, making it nice and warm in here. Nice and good to work. So I've been picking away a little bit on this 944 rally project. I've got one strut all finished, or mostly finished, and ready to go back on the car with new hardware and lift spacer installed. So I got it kind of figured out how how the best way for me to do it was, and it might not be the way for everyone, but this is the way that I did it, and I found it worked pretty well. So let me show you how I did it, and here we go. So I did get a little carried away, and I already got this strut apart, the top hat and everything off. So sorry, I'll talk about how I did it. So you're going to want to use a spring compressor to compress the spring to release the tension on the top hat that goes there. And then there's the bearing plate that sits on top of it, and that's what we want to make our adjustments to. And the adjustments we have to make to accommodate this kit is, I'll actually show you over here because I'm partially started on it. So the way that I've been doing it is there are the old mounting studs that go up into the body of the car to hold the top of the strut on, and the way the instructions that this kit came with said to do it, go over here to the kit, remove top hats from the struts, you have to take it apart, there's washers, this says trim the bottom corner, nope. All right, I gotta find where we are here. Okay, so it's right here. It says you cannot install the bolts with the top hats on. I've found you can actually get the bolts in if you've done all the work to remove the old studs. So this says trim the lip on the corners of the hat, spring perch side, will allow you to cut the heads off the top hat bolts and remove them to put in the longer bolts. So the reason you have to do that is these are not actually bolts, they're studs, and this head is welded on to this bearing plate. So no matter how much you pound on these, they're not going to come out. I tried. I was hopeful that I could just break the welds and have them pop off. So what the instructions are recommending is to take your angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and kind of cut this corner out so that then you can easily flush cut that head off. It's kind of tough getting into this corner, the grinding wheel to grind the head off. I wasn't a super big fan of doing it that way. I didn't want to take that strength out of this plate. So I have, a little benchtop milling machine here. So what I chose to do is actually go in, and you can see over here, I just milled the head of the studs off. And then what you can do is you can actually just push the studs up and out from the bottom. So in my mind, it was a little bit easier to go. You don't compromise the integrity of this bearing plate. So that's the way I did it. I know not everyone's going to have a little milling machine, so doing the other way is perfect way of doing it. I'm sure there's a lot of other people that do it that way. This is just the way I did it, which is what I'm trying to show with these videos, is the way that I've done it. And or the way that I'm doing it and how it's working out for me. So I'll go ahead and get these other two heads milled off here, and then I'll show you the reassembly process, which is the exact opposite of the disassembly, and it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what to do there. So you can see I just did a few passes over that. I wasn't taking a super heavy cut or anything, and just, you know, zip the head right off. Now I should be able to go in here and just give it a little pop. It's starting to come up. Of course, because I got the camera out now, it's not gonna just pop right off, of course. This is, but you can see it's starting to come right up there a little bit. If I wiggle it, you can see it moving. So just when I take this out, I'll just have to give it a little tap with a hammer, and then it'll come right out. And then I got a nice flat surface, just like these two, for my new washer and bolt head to sit on, which will be great. So I'm gonna go and mill this other one off, and then I'll show you putting it back together. So now that we got this next one, the head all milled off, let's see if this one will pop out a little bit easier. I think it will. Almost. It's kind of tough. I'm sorry if I'm not exactly getting the shot. There we go. And then they just come right out like that. They leave you a nice hole for your new hardware to go through. You're good to go. That one, I'll just have to give it a little tap once I pull it out. So we'll get this pulled out, head back over to the bench, we'll put it back together. So now we got this out of the mill. I just gave the one stud a little bonk, and it just came right out. The next thing I did is I just took a little chamfer, you know, a little chamfer guy to the holes to take, you know, any burrs or anything off them. It just makes it so the hardware goes through a little bit nicer. And one thing that I did with this is I popped the bearing for the strut out, and all it does is it just sits in here. I'll just give it a little push. Goes right back in. There is a spacer that drops down on this hole. It goes right in there for the bearing, and then your top washer goes right on top of that. So what we're gonna do with the spring still compressed, I was playing with this shock, so we're gonna make sure it's up all the way. The shock is pretty shot, unfortunately, but because this is hopefully, I'm saying this now, we'll see what I say in the end, but I'm going with super cheap build on this. It should get struts, or, you know, this is a early car, so it does have the replaceable, you can kind of see the cap that's threaded on there. It does have the replaceable inserts in there. Should I get new shocks for it? Yes. Is that going to happen, at least right now? No. because I still have to go through that engine and get that running and into the car. So we're just getting the suspension done and moving on. So what we're going to do, we're going to put our top hat of the spring on, and then we're going to put our bearing plate, which has, which allows this to turn and all that. And so here we can actually, kind of fiddle these up through. It is kind of nice to get them on while everything's loose, and you can jiggle things around as needed. Good thing to do as well is we'll drop washers. I'll look at that one in a minute. So as you put them through, I guess I don't even really need the washers right now, but we'll just put a nut on here so it can't fall all the way out, because they can kind of work their way out. Like this one is trying to do. And it's kind of nice to not have to hold on to them while you're putting the nut that holds the whole mess together on. Give that a spin. And these bolts, I don't know if I mentioned, if I did, sorry, but these are 8mm bolts, and they are 70mm long. So that is, and that's if you're going with a 2-inch lift, which that's what this is getting. 2-inch lift, you need 70mm bolts. I think for a shorter, or a lift that's not as tall, you can get away with shorter bolts. In the instructions that come with your kit, they kind of go through all that. And the kit that I got, it was really nice. He sent me all the hardware with it for this to put it together, which was super cool. So yeah, then we got our nut that goes on the shaft of the shock itself. And that's what sandwiches this all together. So the way that I took it apart is probably not the most conventional, but because these shocks are kind of shot and they have this giant bump stop on here, what I did is I just slid this down so you can kind of access the top, and then I took a pair of vice grips and just clamped as high up on the shaft as I could, where I knew that when this compresses it won't go down into the shock body because that'll destroy the seals, but it's still up in where this bump stop is. So that section of the shock is never going to see any use. It's contained within the bump stop. There's nothing we need to worry about with putting a pair of vice grips on all the way up there. So I'll get this on, and then what I'll do is just tighten that top nut with the impact and be good to go. All right, so just tighten that top nut on there. Just set it on, pretty tight. You don't want that coming off at all. You'll have a really bad time because this whole strut assembly will drop right out. So what we're going to do now is loosen the spring compressor on that to put the tension back on our top hat. And one thing you want to do before you do that, I'm sorry, I'm horrible at aiming the camera while looking at what I'm doing. You want to make sure that the ends of your springs are in their appropriate pockets before you let the tension off, because if you let the tension off and they're not in their home, it will kind of sit funny and it'll be really tough to move it where it needs to go. So just go and loosen that one, and we'll loosen the other side. And you can see the spring, you know, kind of decompressing there. And then this compressor tool that I'm using is really nice. It's got these little hooks with wing nuts that kind of hold these compressors so they can't slip off and, you know, just release the tension on the spring and kind of surprise you. So I'll take them off. And then this strut, for the top half at least, is all good to go.